The village lay cradled by forests so dense that the sun struggled to touch the earth beneath the tall, ancient baobabs. Their trunks were like the arms of elders, strong and wise, holding the stories of centuries in their bark. Birds sang in harmony, their voices carrying the secrets of the river and the whispers of the ancestors. Every leaf seemed to hum with life, and every stone remembered the feet of those who had walked here long before. The villagers moved among this living world, their lives intertwined with the rhythm of nature, each act a reflection of balance and respect. Mama Bina sat outside her small mud and thatch hut, her hands folded over her thin frame. Her eyes, sharp though weary, watched the children play by the river, laughing and chasing each other to the reeds. She had lived through many seasons, seen the sun rise and fall countless times, and she knew that the forest had its own eyes. "The trees," she whispered to herself, "see everything. They know the heart of a person even before the person knows it." The river flowed gently past, carrying fish, water, and stories downstream. Women bent low, washing clothes and singing songs that echoed with gratitude and endurance. Men returned from the fields, their skin glistening with sweat, offering greetings to neighbors and elders. Life here was simple, yet it carried weight, the weight of duty, of love, of connection. Every action, even the smallest, was woven into the moral fabric of the community. Yet beyond this peaceful world lay the city, glittering and cold. Adissa, once a boy of this village, now a man of immense wealth, strode through streets of marble and steel. His clothes were expensive, his car sleek and powerful, yet his eyes, though sharp, betrayed a hollow longing. He had chased gold, power, and recognition, leaving behind the warmth of his mother's touch, the wisdom of the elders, and the song of the river. The village was a memory now, distant as the stars in the city's night sky, but something tugged at his soul, something unnamed, like a shadow that would not leave him alone. In the village, Mama Abina rose slowly and placed her hands on the trunk of the oldest baobab. She closed her eyes and felt the pulse of the earth beneath her fingers, the heartbeat of the ancestors flowing through her. "He forgets," she murmured, "but the forest does not. One day he will remember." The wind rustled the branches, as if carrying her words to the city, a message unheeded but not lost. The forest was alive, and it remembered every choice, every act of carelessness, every betrayal. The villagers continued their daily routines, unaware of the city beyond the hills, yet bound to it to the threads of blood and memory. Children splashed in the river, elders offered blessings at the rise of the sun, and Mama Abina moved slowly, each step a testament to endurance. Life in the village was cyclical, filled with rites and rhythms that the city could never replicate. Even the forest, dense and mysterious, offered lessons of patience, morality, and unseen justice. It bore witness to human deeds, marking both the good and the ill for those who would one day return. Night approached, and the forest's whispers grew louder. Shadows of the baobab stretched across the earth, casting patterns that seemed almost like writing. Mama Abina lit a small fire, the smoke curling upward toward the heavens. She hummed an old song, one that had been passed down through generations, telling of ancestors who guided the living and corrected wrongs in ways that humans could not always see. The firelight danced on her face, revealing deep lines, eyes that had seen both joy and betrayal, and lips that had offered forgiveness when deserved. Far away, in his city penthouse, Adissa stood by the window, looking down at the streets below, glittering but hollow. He could not hear the river's song, could not feel the forest's watchful gaze, but something in the depth of his mind stirred uneasily. Memories of his mother, fragile yet strong, haunted him. The whispers of the forest, though unheard, reached him through dreams and unease, a reminder that wealth could not shield him from the consequences of his actions. Back in the village, Mama Abina rested beneath the largest baobab, hands pressed to the earth. She felt the forest's pulse, the river's flow, and the eyes of ancestors watching over her. "All that is taken," she whispered, "shall one day return. The forest remembers, the river carries, and a heart never forgets." The wind carried her words across the trees, into the night, reaching toward the city where her son walked alone among his riches, unaware that the roots he had abandoned were alive, patient, and waiting. The village slept under the protective shadow of the baobabs. The river murmured softly in the moonlight, and the wind sang through the forest. In this land, where every stone, tree, and drop of water held meaning, life continued, steady, wise, and enduring. The forest had witnessed all love, betrayal, and the delicate balance of morality. And somewhere far away, Odysseus' journey toward understanding, redemption, and reckoning had quietly begun. The river wound its way through the heart of the village, glimmering like a silver ribbon under the sun's gentle gaze. Its waters sang as they moved, carrying whispers of the ancestors and secrets of the land. Children laughed and splashed along the riverbank, their bare feet stirring up the mud, their voices blending with the murmur of the water. "Catch me if you can," a small boy shouted, darting past his sister, who squealed in delight. The elders watched nearby, some washing clothes in the flowing water, others kneeling to scoop it into clay pots for cooking and drinking. Each movement, each sound, was part of a rhythm older than memory, a dance of survival and tradition. Mama Abina leaned on the smooth stones of the river's edge, her thin hands submerged in the cool current. She hummed an old song, passed down through countless generations, that spoke of rivers as lifelines connecting the living with the spirits of those who came before. Her eyes followed the children, her lips curving into a gentle smile. "Water gives life, but also remembers," she murmured to herself. "It remembers the hands that washed, the feet that ran, the hearts that strayed and returned." A group of women approached, carrying woven baskets filled with yams and millet. They greeted each other with nods and laughter, voices carrying stories of yesterday's harvest and tomorrow's promise. One woman, Acua, dipped her hands into the river and whispered, "Mama Abina, you see how the children grow strong? It is the river that nourishes them, as it nourishes the earth and the soul." The older woman nodded, her eyes reflecting the water's shimmer. "Yes, Acua, the river does not forget. It carries every lesson, every act of love or neglect. One day, all deeds will return." Nearby, a young man carried a clay pot on his head, carefully balancing it as he walked to the village. He paused to greet an elder, bowing slightly in respect. "Good morning, Baba Kwame," he said. "The river flows gently today, but I hear the wind speak a change." The elder's eyes twinkled with quiet knowledge. "Change is always near, my son, but the river teaches patience. Learn from it. The forest and the water see what men often ignore." Amidst this daily rhythm, the presence of the city felt like a shadow stretching across the village, though it was miles away. Odysseus, once a boy of this soil, now roamed marble halls far from the rivers and forests that nurtured him. He wore fine clothes, drove cars that roared like lions, and spoke words that commanded attention. Yet the laughter of children by the river, the gentle murmur of water over stones, and the wise eyes of Mama Abina haunted him, slipping into dreams he could not shake. He remembered the tug of the river's current, the scent of the forest, the feel of his mother's hand guiding him along narrow paths. In his pursuit of wealth, he had abandoned this life, not realizing that gold could never carry the weight of memory or the lessons of the river. The river itself seemed to sigh, ripples forming patterns like ancient symbols on its surface. A child tripped and fell, and his sister laughed. Helping him up, Mama Abina reached out, her voice calm yet commanding. "Remember, little ones, the river gives freely, but it teaches gently. Respect it, and it will teach you more than any city ever could." Her words drifted through the air, blending with the songs of birds and the rustle of leaves. The children nodded, understanding instinctively the deep truth of what she said. A herder drove goats across the shallow waters, their hooves splashing rhythmically, and the villagers paused to watch. The scene seemed ordinary, yet it held extraordinary significance. The river was not just water, it was a witness, a living record of the village's joys and sins. Mama Abina bent low, pressing her hand to the surface, feeling the flow against her skin. "It remembers," she whispered. "It remembers everything. And one day, it will remind those who have forgotten their place." As the sun climbed higher, the river sparkled like molten silver, carrying laughter, lessons, and life itself. Villagers gathered at its banks, trading greetings, sharing small offerings, and exchanging stories. Each ripple reflected not only the sky above, but the history of the people who had lived here for generations. Even as a city called Odessa with its temptations and promises, the river remained steadfast, a symbol of continuity, memory, and the enduring bond between land, water, and community. By evening, the river glowed under the fading sun, casting golden reflections on the faces of those who had labored and played along its banks. Mama Abina rose slowly, her back bent but her spirit unbroken, and whispered into the gentle wind, "The river carries all. The river remembers. And nothing lost of the water is ever truly gone." Far away, in a tower of glass and steel, Odysseus shivered, though no wind touched him. Somewhere deep inside, he heard the river's song, faint but undeniable, a call back to a life he had left behind, a life rich in lessons a city could never buy. Mama Abina's hut sat quietly at the edge of the forest, surrounded by the towering baobabs whose wide trunks held stories older than any villager could remember. The walls, made from mud and straw, bore cracks from years of sun and rain, yet they stood strong, as if the earth itself had blessed them with endurance. Smoke spiraled lazily from the small clay chimney, carrying the scent of roasted yams and dried herbs into the morning air. Despite its simplicity, the hut radiated warmth, sheltering not just a body, but a spirit that had known hardship, love, and the careful lessons of a long life. Inside, Mama Bina sat on a mat woven by her own hands, her frail frame bent slightly, yet there was a quiet dignity in her posture, a resilience that came from years of tending to the needs of others. Her eyes, soft but clear, scanned the small room, noting the neatly stacked firewood, the clay pots filled with water, and the woven baskets of grain. Each item had its purpose, and each was treated with care, for in this village, respect for one's home was respect for one's soul. Outside, children ran past the hut, their laughter mingling with the rustle of the leaves. Mama Abina smiled, remembering a time when those feet had belonged to her own grandchildren. "Ah, little ones," she murmured, her voice gentle like the river's murmur. "The world is wide, but the heart must stay rooted." She dipped her fingers into a small clay bowl of water and let it trickle through her hands, feeling the life it carried, the same water that nourished crops and quenched thirst. It reminded her that survival was more than strength. It was patience, care, and understanding the balance of all things. Villagers often stopped by her hut to seek guidance. Today, Acua, a young mother from across the river, approached, her basket of yams balanced on her head. "Mama Abina," she called softly, bowing in respect. "The children have returned from the fields, but the river has brought a new trouble. Some of the younger goats have wandered into the reeds." Mama Abina's voice, though calm, carried weight. "Acua, tend to them with care, for the river watches. It does not forget who honors it and who does not. Even the smallest act can ripple far beyond our sight." The hut, small as it was, seemed to hold more than walls. It held the lessons of life, the resilience of one who had endured, and the love that bound the village together. It was a place where morals were taught not in words alone, but in every action. In the way the fire was carefully tended, the grain stored safely, the water shared freely. Visitors felt it as soon as they stepped inside, a quiet reminder that wealth was not counted in coins, but in character. Evening approached, and the forest cast long shadows that danced across the hut's walls. Mama Abina stepped outside, leaning on her walking stick, and looked at the setting sun filtering through the leaves. The air carried the scent of damp earth and the faint smoke from other homes. Children ran home to their mothers' calls. Elders nodded greetings from distant paths, and the village settled into the rhythm of night. Mama Abina's hut glowed softly in the fading light, a beacon of steadiness amid the ever-changing world. She thought of Odessa, her son, far away in the city of glass and steel, where sunlight never touched the walls and the streets echoed with ambition rather than laughter. He had chosen a path of wealth and power, leaving behind the simple truths that the village lived by. Yet, Mama Abina did not scold or curse him. She understood that life tested each person differently. "One day," she whispered to the baobabs, "he will remember the river, the forest, and the hand that once guided him. Until then, the hut stands. It waits. It teaches." From within, the scent of herbs mingled with the smoke from the cooking fire. Mama Abina prepared a small meal, humming softly, a tune that carried the stories of her ancestors. She placed a bowl of porridge outside the hut for any stray animal or traveler, knowing that giving, even in small ways, was part of the fabric of life. The hut itself seemed alive, breathing with her, reflecting her spirit of nurturing, resilience, and unwavering morality. Night fell, and the stars emerged, mirrored in the gentle waves of the nearby river. The village slept under the watchful eyes of the forest, each home bathed in the soft glow of lanterns or moonlight. Mama Bina settled onto her mat, her hands folded, eyes closing in quiet meditation. The hut, simple yet strong, held her stories, her wisdom, and the lessons she had taught the village for decades. It was more than shelter. It was a symbol of endurance, a testament to the strength of those who care for others, and a reminder that morality and resilience were the truest forms of wealth. And far away, in his cold city tower, Odessa tossed and turned, a nameless unease gnawing at him. Somewhere deep inside, the lessons of the hut, the patience, the love, the quiet power of morality, called to him. He could not see it, but the memory of Mama Bina's hut, humble yet unshakable, had planted a seed that, one day, might grow into understanding, regret, and perhaps redemption. Far away from the murmuring rivers and whispering forests of his childhood, Odessa strode through the gleaming city streets, his polished shoes clicking on marble floors, echoing off towers that seemed to pierce the sky. The sun reflected off glass buildings, blinding in its brilliance, yet it brought no warmth to his heart. He drove his black luxury car with effortless ease, windows tinted, engine purring like a lion in chains. Around him, the city moved in a relentless rhythm of ambition and desire, a place where wealth was worshipped and every man sought to rise higher than the one beside him. Inside his towering penthouse, Odessa looked down at the city that sprawled endlessly below. Lights shimmered like fallen stars, yet they felt cold, distant, and hollow. He poured himself a drink, swirling the amber liquid, and stared at the reflection of his own face in the glass. The sharp lines of his jaw, the carefully groomed hair, the expensive suit, none of it could fill the void gnawing at his chest. "I have everything," he muttered to the empty room, "yet I feel less." Business calls came without pause, messages pinged on his phone, and yet each voice on the other end seemed distant, untrustworthy, seeking gain rather than connection. Odessa's ambition had carried him far from the dusty paths and laughing rivers of his village. He had left behind the simple truths his mother taught him, that wealth is measured not in coins, but in respect, patience, and care for one's kin. Now, surrounded by opulence, he understood the cost. He had traded roots for gold, warmth for steel, and love for power. He walked to the window, staring at the city lights, and in the quiet of the night, memories crept in. The river that ran through his village, shimmering with sunlight and laughter. The small mud and thatch hut where his mother, Mama Bina, sat humming her ancient songs. The smell of herbs and smoke, the rhythm of the forest, the eyes of elders that saw every misstep and forgave none. "Mama," he whispered, though her ears were far away, lost in the bush and the stories of the trees. I did what I thought I had to." A knock on the door brought him back. His assistant entered, speaking of deals and deadlines, numbers and profits. Odessa nodded, his mind only half present. "Close it for me," he said, waving toward the window. "I need silence." The assistant hesitated, but obeyed. Alone again, Odessa sank into a leather chair, the weight of his choices pressing heavily upon him. Each dollar he earned felt heavier than the last, tainted by the memory of what, or who, he had abandoned. In the city, nights were bright and days were endless. Odessa filled them with meetings, parties, and displays of wealth. Yet the echo of the river, the laughter of children, and the quiet wisdom of Mama Bina refused to be silenced. He began to see the contrast clearly. In the village, life was rich with meaning, each action respected, each person accountable. Here, riches were hollow, and power came with loneliness and suspicion. He had chased ambition, and ambition had left him adrift. He thought of the baobab trees, standing firm despite storms, and the river that carried lessons through generations. "Did I trade all that," he whispered, "for this emptiness?" Even in the midst of luxury, a shiver ran down his spine. Something deeper than regret had begun to stir, a seed planted by memory ancestral eyes, and the river's song he had thought long forgotten. The city lights reflected in the glass as he gazed down, and for the first time, Adissa felt the weight of moral cost, the cost of leaving his roots behind. The laughter of villagers, the smell of smoke from Mama Abina's hut, the songs of the forest, all seemed to call to him across the distance. The penthouse, the cars, the towers, all that he had strived for, could not replace the warmth and lessons of a life lived in connection, love, and respect. He sank into silence, the city bustling below, unaware of the moral reckoning slowly unfolding in the heart of one man. Adissa realized that no amount of gold could mend what had been broken by ambition, and no deal, no tower, no car could bring him the peace that came from staying true to one's roots. And somewhere far away, Mama Abina, the river and the forest waited patiently, watching, remembering, and holding the lesson that wealth without morality is an empty gift, and that one day, the balance of demand to be restored. The wind outside whispered through the city streets, carrying an invisible echo of the forests and rivers he had left behind. It spoke of patience, of endurance, of justice, and of redemption for those who dared to seek it. Adissa closed his eyes and felt, for the first time in years, the pull of home, the pull of a life that was never truly lost, waiting only for him to remember its value. The sun rose slowly over the village, casting long shadows across the earth and setting the river aglow like molten silver. Villagers emerged from their huts, carrying baskets of yams, millet, and fresh vegetables, greeting one another with warm smiles and laughter that mingled with the songs of birds in the trees. Smoke from cooking fires spiraled into the morning air, bringing the scent of roasted cassava and herbs to every corner of the village. Each movement, each sound, was a thread in the fabric of life, woven tightly by generations who had known hardship and joy in equal measure. Women bent over their pots near the river, washing grains and preparing meals for their families. One hummed a tune that had traveled through the years, carrying wisdom of patience and gratitude. "The river feeds the earth, and the earth feeds our hearts," she sang softly, glancing toward the children who darted past, laughing and splashing the shallow water. The laughter of the children echoed through the village, a sound both innocent and sacred, a reminder of life's continuity. Elders sat beneath the shade of baobab trees, sharing stories of old, the battles won and lost, the ancestors' lessons, and the spirits that watched over them. Their voices, slow and deliberate, carried authority and warmth. "Remember, my children," one elder said, "the land and the river are not ours alone. They are witnesses. They remember every kindness, every betrayal, every choice. Treat them well, and they will treat you well in return." The villagers nodded in silent agreement, absorbing the lesson without needing more. Men returned from the fields, their bodies glistening with sweat, faces lined with effort and perseverance. They carried hoes and baskets heavy with crops, greeting neighbors and friends with hearty nods. "The yams are good this season," one man said, setting down his basket. "The rains were generous, and the earth has rewarded us. Let us give thanks to the river and the trees that shelter us." The communal spirit of the village was palpable. Everyone had a role, and every action mattered, for the village thrived on cooperation, respect, and shared responsibility. Children ran errands, fetching water from the river, feeding goats, and delivering small bundles of firewood to the elders. Their steps were light, yet they carried lessons in responsibility and care. A small boy approached Mama Abina's hut, bowing respectfully before speaking. "Grandmother, the goats have wandered near the reeds again." Mama Abina nodded slowly, her hands folded in her lap. "Guide them carefully, my child. Remember, life is much like this village. Every small act affects the whole. Even the river shifts when a pebble falls." The boy's eyes widened, understanding the weight of her words, and he ran toward the animals with renewed care. In the heart of the village, smoke and laughter mixed with the sound of chopping wood and the creak of woven baskets. Each hut bore the marks of care. Neat piles of grain, pots lined by the fire, mats laid in orderly patterns. There was no wealth in gold or silver here, but abundance of spirit, of trust, and of shared labor. Neighbors exchanged meals, tips for planting, and stories of ancestors who had walked these same paths. "See how the village thrives when we work together?" Mama Abina called to a passing youth. Alone we are fragile, but together we are strong as the baobab roots. As the day wore on, the sun climbed high, and the river shimmered under its heat. Villagers paused to drink, wash, or rest beneath the broad leaves of trees that had stood for centuries. The forest whispered in the wind, reminding them of the spirits that guarded the land, the river, and the village. Even in toil, there was a rhythm, a balance between effort and rest, struggle and laughter. Life was not easy, but it was authentic, honest in its demands and generous in its rewards. Far away, in a city of steel and glass, Odysseus sat in his towering apartment, gazing down at streets that never slept. He saw no rivers, no children laughing, no elders teaching with patience and love. He had traded mud huts for marble, smoke-filled kitchens for polished counters, and the warmth of community for cold luxury. Yet in the stillness of night, the village's songs came to him in memory. The river, the baobabs, Mama Abina's voice, and a hollow ache filled his chest. Wealth had given him power, but it had stolen connection, understanding, and peace. Back in the village, the day faded into evening. Fires glowed in every hut. Shadows of the baobab stretched long across the ground, and the river carried reflections of stars in its gentle waves. The villagers gathered, sharing meals and stories under the watchful eyes of ancestors and forest spirits. The simplicity of life, its challenges and joys, endured like the river itself, ever flowing, ever teaching. Mama Abina rested, a quiet smile on her face, knowing that the village's heart beat strong, rooted in tradition, resilience, and the lessons of the land. And somewhere far away, Odysseus heard, in the quiet of his empty apartment, the echo of a life he had abandoned, a call he could not ignore, a reminder that simplicity, love, and community held a power far greater than wealth, and that the river, the forest, and his mother's wisdom waited patiently for him to return. High above the streets that never slept, Odysseus stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse, the city lights glimmering like a sea of stars trapped in steel and glass. The hum of traffic, the distant sirens, the chatter of unseen people, all blended into a constant background, a noise he had grown accustomed to, yet it offered no comfort. His reflection in the polished glass stared back at him. Sharp suits, sleek hair, a face shaped by ambition and hardened by choices. Yet the eyes betrayed him. They were tired, hollow, searching for something he could not name. He poured himself a drink, amber liquid sloshing in the crystal glass, and traced the rim with his finger. "I have everything," he whispered, voice trembling despite the silence of the room. Everything except peace. The walls around him gleamed with wealth. Paintings worth fortunes, sculptures that spoke of status, furniture carved from rare wood, but none of it felt alive. None of it could bring the warmth of home, the laughter of children, or the steady hand of a mother who had once guided him. Odysseus sank into a leather chair, the city sprawling below, cold and distant. He remembered the river from his village, its water gleaming in the morning sun, carrying songs and stories, lessons whispered by elders and ancestors. He remembered Mama Abina, frail yet unyielding, humming her ancient songs as she prepared meals or guided the young. He remembered the baobab trees, their roots deep in the earth, steady and wise. And he remembered the choice he had made, the choice to leave behind mud huts for marble towers, rivers for highways, family for fortune. The phone buzzed insistently on the side table. Odysseus ignored it. Numbers, deals, contracts, each one promising more power, more wealth, more prestige. But in that silence, he realized the truth. All the ambition in the world could not fill the hollow space left by what he had abandoned. He had traded roots for coins, tradition for glass, love for status. And yet, even in the glittering heights of the city, the village called to him, not in words, but in memory, not in walls or towers, but in the gentle tug of conscience and the unshakable echo of ancestral eyes. He stood and walked to the balcony, the wind brushing against his face, carrying with it nothing of home, nothing of river or forest. He thought of the villagers tending their farms, sharing stories beneath the shade of baobabs, living in a rhythm older than the city itself. The children laughing, the elders teaching, the women singing as they worked, all of it alive and whole. Here, he had replaced that life with quiet isolation, surrounded by opulence, yet starved of soul. "What have I gained?" he muttered to the night. "If I have lost what truly matters." He sank onto the edge of the balcony, looking down at streets alive with strangers, their faces unknown, their lives disconnected from his own. His wealth had created distance, not connection. Each deal closed, each acquisition made, felt heavier than the last, like stones pressing down on a heart that had grown faint. He thought of Mama Abina, wondering if she survived, if the river still carried her stories, if the forest still watched over her as she had always watched over him. A pang of guilt cut through him, sharp and sudden. He had abandoned the lessons of his childhood, the morality instilled in him by a mother who had given everything so he could seek a life of abundance. He poured another drink, then set it down, untouched. The crystal glinted in the soft glow of the city lights, but it offered no comfort. He remembered the simplicity of village life, the communal meals, the laughter shared over humble bowls, the strength of bonds forged in hardship and trust. And he realized the city's brilliance was a mask, a bright, hollow mask hiding emptiness. Money could not heal memory. Power could not replace connection, and ambition could not summon forgiveness of a mother whose love he had taken for granted. Adissa closed his eyes and let the silence envelop him. He imagined the forest at night, the river carrying the moon's reflection, the baobab shadows stretching across the earth. He heard, faintly, the hum of Mama Bina's song, as though carried across time and space by the wind. The sound touched something deep within him, awakening a longing he could no longer ignore. Wealth had given him power, but the village had given him life, roots, and lessons that no amount of gold could replicate. The city's noises faded, leaving only the echo of what had been lost. Adissa realized that his journey had only begun, that the emptiness he felt was a call, a reminder that he could not outrun morality, tradition, or the love of those who had shaped him. Somewhere far away, in the village, Mama Abina waited, steady and patient. The river carried her stories, and the forest remembered. And Adissa, alone in the gleaming tower of steel and glass, understood at last. No riches could fill the void left by abandoning the heart, the home, and the lessons that only time, love, and humility could teach. Night settled over the city like a heavy curtain, yet the lights never dimmed. Adissa sat alone in his penthouse, the distant hum of traffic a constant reminder that the world outside moved without pause. The marble floors reflected the gold and crystal that surrounded him, yet they offered no warmth. As he leaned back in his chair, exhaustion weighed heavily on his chest. Not from work, but from something far deeper, a gnawing emptiness that no wealth could fill. He closed his eyes, tried to shut out the noise, and suddenly he was no longer in the penthouse. He was standing by the river in his village, water flowing gently over smooth stones. The children laughed as they played, splashing and calling to one another. Mama Abina's voice drifted in the wind, humming a song older than memory. "Adissa, remember who you are and where you came from." The voice felt real, almost as if the river itself spoke to him. Adissa stirred, eyes snapping open. The city was still there, cold and gleaming, but for a moment he felt the pull of something ancient, something alive that he had left behind. He shook his head, trying to banish the vision. "It's just memory," he muttered. Nothing more. But even as he said it, a shadow crossed the room, a fleeting whisper that seemed to come from the walls themselves. The next night, he dreamed again. The forest surrounded him, dark and watchful, the wind carrying voices that spoke in tongues he almost understood. Leaves rustled like whispers, and among the shadows he thought he saw figures, women, children, elders, moving silently, eyes heavy with judgment and sorrow. Mama Abina stood at the center, frail but firm, holding a staff carved with symbols of protection and wisdom. Her gaze pierced him. "Adissa," she said, voice steady as the river's flow, "you have taken much and returned little. The land, the people, the spirits, they remember, they wait." He awoke in a sweat, heart hammering. The city was quiet, yet the feeling of being watched lingered. Windows reflected nothing, yet he could sense eyes upon him, unseen and unyielding. He walked to the balcony, staring out at streets alive with people, yet all of them seemed distant, disconnected, unaware of the currents moving beneath the world they trod. Even the wind seemed colder here, carrying no songs of rivers or whispers of ancestral wisdom. During the following days, subtle signs began to unsettle him. A painting fell from its stand for no reason. His expensive car refused to start after a long drive, though the mechanic found nothing wrong. In meetings, contracts signed in haste seemed to unravel, clients withdrawing unexpectedly. Each small disruption gnawed at his confidence, whispering to him that wealth could not shield him from the lessons he had ignored. One night, as he lay in his grand bed, he thought he heard the distant laughter of children mingled with the rustling of leaves. At first, he convinced himself it was the wind, or perhaps the faint echo of a television from the street below. But the laughter persisted, growing louder, insistent, weaving with the rhythm of his heartbeat. "It's them, it's my village," he whispered aloud, fear and longing entwined in his voice. "What have I done?" In another dream, the baobab trees appeared, their thick roots twisting like serpents across the land. Their branches reached toward the sky, yet their eyes seemed to follow him. The river ran black instead of silver, carrying shadows instead of children's laughter. And at the riverbank stood Mama Abina, smaller and frilier than he remembered, yet her eyes burned with quiet fury. "Adissa, the river remembers," she said, voice echoing his mind even after he woke. And what is remembered always returns. Even in his penthouse, surrounded by every luxury he had once desired, Adissa felt the weight of his abandonment pressing in. The city's bright lights could not illuminate the darkness within. He began to feel restless, unable to focus on deals or meetings, haunted by flashes of the village, the river, the huts, the fires under baobab trees, and the mother he had left behind. He had sought wealth to escape hardship, yet hardship, he realized, had followed him in new forms. The loneliness, the unease, the whispered warnings of ancestors he could no longer ignore. One evening, he picked up an old talisman that had belonged to Mama Abina, a small carved figure of a woman holding a child. It felt warm in his hand, as if infused with life, and a shiver ran down his spine. Perhaps it is not too late," he murmured. The talisman seemed to pulse against his palm, a reminder that the bonds of blood, tradition, and morality could not be erased by stone and steel. The whispers of the forest, the river, and his mother's eyes all converged in that moment, demanding recognition, accountability, and change. The city, for all its brilliance, now felt fragile, as if the walls themselves could not hold him from what he had abandoned. He understood at last that the consequences of leaving his roots behind were not distant. They were near, ever-present and impatient, waiting for the day he would face them. The dreams, the whispers, the subtle disruptions. They were not threats, but reminders, carrying the voice of the land and the ancestors. And somewhere in his heart, Adissa knew that he would have to return, not just for himself, but to reconcile with the life and mother he had left behind, and to honor the lessons of morality and tradition that no city could ever replace. The sun dipped behind the distant hills, casting the village in hues of gold and crimson. The river's waters, ever faithful, glimmered in the fading light, carrying reflections of the sky, the trees, and the village huts. A gentle wind rustled to the leaves of the baobab trees, whispering secrets only the elders and the forest could understand. In that quiet, the village seemed alive, breathing with patience and memory, carrying the echoes of all who had walked its paths. Even as Adissa sat in his city penthouse, surrounded by steel and glass, his thoughts drifted back to this place. The village he had left behind, the mother he had abandoned, the forest, the river, and the baobabs were not merely witnesses. They were keepers of truth, guardians of justice that transcended time. In the city, he had everything money could buy, yet he could not silence the whispers that came in dreams, carried by wind, or felt in a sudden shiver of conscience. Mama Abina remained in the bush, frail yet unbroken. Her small hut, once humble and warm, now stood alone among the shadows of towering trees. Each morning she rose with the sun, fetching water from the river, gathering firewood, and tending the small patches of cassava and yams. The forest watched her movements, its leaves rustling as if applauding her resilience. "Even in absence," she murmured to herself, "the land holds what we cannot see. Patience carries the way to justice." Her voice, soft yet firm, was carried by the wind, as though speaking not only to herself but to her absent son, Adissa, and to the spirits that moved silently among the trees. Days and nights passed. The forest, alive with birds, insects, and the subtle rustle of unseen creatures, became a mirror of time itself. Mama Abina's frailty was matched by strength, rooted in experience and moral certainty. She tended her small plot, shared stories with wandering children who sought refuge in her wisdom, and listened to the river's lessons. Every ripple, every bird call, every shifting shadow reminded her that the bush was patient, that it remembered, and that it could deliver justice without haste, only with inevitability. Far above, Adissa's city life continued in relentless pursuit of wealth and power. Yet, the dreams grew stronger. At night, he heard voices carried on winds that did not belong to the city, soft admonishments, warnings wrapped in maternal tones. Sometimes the river spoke to him in his sleep. Sometimes the rustle of leaves felt like the whisper of 1,000 eyes, observing, reminding. "You have left much undone, Adissa," a voice murmured one night, low and insistent, blending with the hum of the city. The river remembers, the forest watches. In these dreams, he saw the bush as it truly was, not wild and empty, but vibrant, sentient, and moral. Every tree seemed to hold memory, every animal, every shadow, a lesson. The baobabs, their roots thick and steadfast, held stories of generations. The river, flowing with patience and persistence, carried the burdens of deeds long past, returning them to the living when the time was right. And there, standing at the center of it all, was Mama Abina, small, frail, but unyielding, a symbol of morality, resilience, and the enduring power of conscience. Adissa awoke one morning to a sudden clarity. The city's brilliance, once intoxicating, felt hollow. He realized that every luxury, every towering building, every shiny car was meaningless without balance, without honor, without acknowledgement of what he had forsaken. The forest, the river, the village, they were silent yet alive, teaching him that moral reckoning comes not with speed but with patience, that justice may be subtle but always sure, and that redemption requires courage and humility. Back in the village, Mama Abina paused by the riverbank, looking at the flowing water as if it carried her prayers. The wind moved through the leaves, gentle but insistent, carrying whispers of ancestral guidance. "The boy will learn," she said softly. "The forest waits. The river waits. And those who abandon their roots will return to find the truth that waits for them, patient as the earth itself." The children who played nearby listened wide-eyed, as though the words had meaning beyond their understanding, a lesson in patience, virtue, and the invisible threads connecting all living things. As night fell, the forest deepened into shadows and soft murmurs. The baobabs stood like silent sentinels. The river murmured its eternal song, and the village, small yet vibrant, glowed faintly under the stars. Life moved in cycles here, slow and deliberate, yet relentless in its moral rhythm. The bush was alive, a living witness to human deeds, patient in observation, exact in consequence, waiting for the moment when justice and reconciliation would come. Somewhere far above, Adissa gazed at the distant cityscape, unaware of the lessons carried by the wind, the whispers of the forest, and the river that remembered all. Yet, whether in dreams, memory, or inevitable fate, he was bound to the village, to the bush, and to the mother he had left behind. The forest, ever patient, and the village, ever resilient, would wait, holding the moral truth in silence, as it always had.